Hello, I'm Joy Burns-Roger and welcome to your Government in Action. Thank you for joining us. 39 intern students on their medical journey at Western Atlantic University School of Medicine in Freeport, Grand Bahama received their white coats, stethoscopes, and diagnostic kits, marking their achievement at a white coat ceremony at Grand Lucayan Resort, September 10, 2022. Ledidra Marsh has that story.
It was a proud moment for 39 Western Atlantic University School of Medicine students participating in the university's white coat ceremony on Saturday, September 10, 2022 in Grand Bahama, as Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Davis, commended them on their accomplishments. Prime Minister Davis was the keynote speaker at the ceremony held at the Grand Lucayan Resort. During his remarks of congratulations, he noted that the medical school's Grand Bahama campus represents two important components of the country's tourism product, namely education and medical tourism.
I commend WASM for its commitment to diversity in education and its confidence in our national economy, notwithstanding the recent challenges in Grand Bahama with Dorian and the pandemic. I'm confident that your best days are ahead of you, and with the government as your partner, there are many number of public-private partnership opportunities that we can exploit as we work together to build the economy of Grand Bahama, the WASM global brand, the education community, and an unmatched legacy of excellence in medical education.
Prime Minister Davis said the government has taken a major step forward in upgrading the infrastructure of the country's healthcare delivery system and is investing in two new state-of-the-art hospitals in Grand Bahama and New Providence, completing several polyclinics and mini hospitals in the Family Islands, and upgrading many existing health clinics.
We have also expanded our telemedicine capacity and expanded the provision of specialist family medical doctors so that we are well on track to ensure that every government clinic has one, including those in the Family Islands.
Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Dr. Michael Darville, admonished the students to understand that with their chosen career path comes great responsibility. As for the transformation of healthcare in the Bahamas, Minister Darville said upgrades are on the way for the clinics in West End, 8 Mile Rock, Sweetings Key, and Hawksbill, and at the Rand Memorial Hospital.
Let me assure you here and the residents who would hear my presentation that these essential repairs will be conducted safely without the disruption of essential medical services here on the island. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited about where we are going in healthcare and healthcare reform in the Commonwealth in the Bahamas, and plans for the construction of a new state-of-the-art hospital next door to your campus is near completion.
Minister for Grand Bahama, the Honorable Ginger Moxie, during her welcome address, said WASM plays a welcomed role in not only assisting with the resurgence of the local economy, but also the advancement of Grand Bahama's health and educational infrastructure.
2 years ago, perhaps more clearly than ever before, we saw the importance of our healthcare providers following the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was their service and dedication that we leaned on to help heal, cure, treat, and save lives. The students being coded today have chosen the same noble path. As the Minister for Grand Bahama, I must admit that I am especially delighted that this wonderful group has chosen WASM on Grand Bahama Island as the launch point for such a meaningful journey. Whether the driving force behind choosing WASM was passion and selflessness, or whether it was the fact that its world-class programs are offered in a location where you are surrounded by beautiful beaches, a city with amenities, and our rich culture, we are pleased to have you here on Grand Bahama.
Now, Grand Bahama residents will soon have a reason to celebrate as well, as plans near completion for a new state-of-the-art hospital. For Your Government in Action, I'm Ladidra Marsh.
Middle managers at University of the Bahamas now have a new industrial agreement governing their terms and conditions of employment. The university, alongside the Public Managers Union, signed the agreement during a press conference that was held on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. The agreement is for the period 2018 to 2023 and notably has provisions for increased training, development and capacity building for managers, support paid sabbaticals for the first time, and refine the grievance procedure. UB President Dr. Eric Rowland said the focus on the professional development of people who are integral to increased quality assurance and continuous improvement at the institution is significant. He said these objectives are particularly important given that UB is seeking international accreditation. President Rowland also stated that the #1 strategic direction of the university is to become accredited. In doing so, we affirm the importance of our managers and will build a strong learning organization focused on professional development and opportunities for supporting a strong leadership program to build excellence in leadership at all levels. The university will renew its focus on lifelong learning and continuous improvements, training, and education that will be beneficial for our managers' success in the workplace. We will ensure that managers are equipped with the tools necessary for their advancement and will provide them with cutting-edge professional development offerings. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Davis, addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations on Saturday, September 24, 2022. He urged delegates of the upcoming COP27 set in Cairo, Egypt, to write the check, continuing his campaign for global action on the issue of climate change. Prime Minister Davis called to action regarding climate justice and fairness, also insisting that the self-interest of many of the world's most developed countries is at stake.
Our ascension to full membership of the United Nations in 1973 was inspired by a recognition of the interdependence of this family of nations and by the hope that dialogue and partnership can be the path to shared solutions. We Bahamians are justifiably, I believe, proud of what we have accomplished in our 50 years of independence. We are free, democratic, entrepreneurial, and resilient, and our small size has not held us back from great achievements at home and on the world stage. But we are ever more aware that many of our greatest challenges emanate from or are made worse by events and conflicts outside of our borders. Hurricane Dorian in 2019 was a Category 5 storm that nearly destroyed 2 of our main islands. It wiped out 30% of our national economic activity. The impact on our economy, on our infrastructure, and on our people is still very much present. The scientific consensus is that as ocean temperatures rise, we can expect hurricanes of greater intensity to arrive with increased frequency. Small island nations, like mine, did not create the emissions that are warming the earth. But nonetheless, we are on the front line of climate catastrophe. Dorian in 2019 was followed by COVID-19 in 2020. What happens in industrialized countries doesn't stay in industrialized countries. Every year, we welcome millions of visitors to the Bahamas. They are drawn by our country's beauty, culture, and people. But for a long while, visitors could not come. This health crisis quickly became an economic crisis and an education crisis too. Now, as we are working to recover, a global inflation crisis stubbornly endures. It is making the basics of life unaffordable for too many and creating more hardships for our people. The same is true for other countries in the CARICOM region and around the world. And of course, day in and day out, we must also defend our thousands of miles of ocean borders from trafficking in people, drugs, and guns. But we are not waiting for others to act. We are doing what we can to be stronger and to be more prepared. But no one country, large or small, acting alone can stop climate change, nor can we individually reduce the threat of future pandemics or end the policies and conflicts driving global inflation or tackle global criminal networks. These problems require collective action. It was the second Secretary General of the UN, Dag Hammarskjöld, who was candid about the purpose of this organization. The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, he said, but in order to save us from hell. The UN was born out of the ashes of 2 world wars. Today, we face different threats, ones that require us to mobilize and innovate, and above all, to collaborate. Of all the risks we face, none requires more urgent action than the climate crisis. Mr. President, by each of us acting out of our own enlightened self-interest, we acknowledge that we ourselves benefit from doing what is in the best interest of all. In meeting the existential challenge posed by the climate crisis, it should be an increasing self-evident truth that none of us can be safe until we are all safe. Thank you.
The Prime Minister also congratulated the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his leadership and for achieving an agreement with Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey to restore trade in the Black Sea, noting the importance of stabilizing world food markets. He also encouraged the Assembly to support the candidature of Bahamian Mr. Stephen Burrow for the seat of Director of the Telecommunication Development Bureau of the International Telecommunications Union for a term running 2023-2026. More of your government in action when we return. Welcome back. Acting Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investments and Aviation, the Honorable Chester Cooper, assured residents of Mayaguana that the Davis administration is committed to meeting all the needs of citizens who find themselves in vulnerable situations. This came during a meeting with the island residents, local government officials, members of the Island Disaster Consultative Committee, and other stakeholders at the conclusion of a field visit to Mayaguana. The purpose of the trip was to personally assess any damage that may have occurred as a result of the impacts of tropical storm force conditions associated with Hurricane Fiona, with the island receiving minimal damage. Matt Mora and Carissa Williamson has these updates.
Mr. Cooper arrived at the airport in Abrahams Bay, accompanied by Minister of Social Services and Urban Development, the Honorable Obadiah H. Wilchcomb, Minister of Agriculture, Marine Resources and Family Island Affairs with responsibility for local government, the Honorable Clay Sweeting, and Mr. Joel Lewis, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. The acting Prime Minister was met by a full delegation, led by Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for disaster preparedness and emergency response, the Honorable Miles LaRoda, Minister of State for the Environment, the Honorable Basil McIntosh, Mr. Alex Storr, Chairman of the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister's Disaster Management Unit, Mr. Carl F. Smith, Captain Stephen Russell, Director, the National Emergency Management Agency, and Mr. Neil Campbell, the Acting Director of Local Government. in addition to senior government officials from across the government sector. Officials on the ground offloaded supplies of water and tarpaulin flown in by the national flag carrier Bahamas Air for distribution. The delegation's assessment tour took them to Pirates Well, Betsy Bay, and Abrahams Bay, assessing infrastructure such as the dock and the reverse osmosis plant in Betsy Bay. Mr. Cooper said the group's presence was an indication of the government's commitment to and support of the residents of Mayaguana.
So it's important that we came today to demonstrate that support. We come in good numbers to demonstrate to you that you are not going to be forgotten. We were delighted to see and hear that there were no major damage, but we did look at your dock. Clearly we recognize that there is some work to be done. We checked out some of your major infrastructure, and we do see some work that needs to be done. And we acknowledge that there are some roofs across the island that will be in need of some repairs. I am advised by Captain Russell that we did bring some tarps in today on Bahamas Air. We're going to ensure in the short order that you have as many of those as you need for temporary fixes, but we also acknowledge the need for ongoing support to ensure that you are restored back to pre-Fiona levels.
The acting Prime Minister told residents that the matter relative to both of the reverse osmosis plants needing backup generator systems will be addressed. The island's water supply was interrupted due to a loss of power.
Notwithstanding that it's good quality and modern equipment, there's a need for a backup generator. They are reliant completely on the BPL facility. And if we have a situation where BPL is down, if we have a backup facility, it doesn't mean that we have to lose our water supply as well. So that is something that we're going to be looking at in relation to the both of the RO plants. Minister McIntosh has spoken with us, his colleagues here, and has expressed that this is a matter of concern for the people here in Mayaguana, and we're going to see what we can do about it.
Acting Prime Minister Cooper said the government will do all that it can to address the island's needs with regards to the dock in Betsy Bay and the airport facility in Abrahams Bay.
In these islands, docks and the airports are critical infrastructure, and we will make every effort as quickly as we can to restore the facility and even make it better. Let me also say in relation to the airport, this happens to fall within my remit, and I can say to the people of Mayaguana that we are going to be looking very closely at building a small terminal here, much like what we did in Ragged Island, to ensure that they have the same level of comfort for air travel as we have in other family islands. So I think that's a model that we can duplicate. It was indeed distressing what we saw there, and we're going to do something about it.
Mr. Cooper said the government of the Bahamas is committed to the sustainable, ongoing development of Mayaguana and is considering strategies that will generate more activity to ensure that commerce that can support the local community well into the future is established. Carissa Williamson has more on this angle.
Addressing residents, local government officials, members of the island's Disaster Consultative Committee, and other stakeholders at the conclusion of the tour, Mr. Cooper said the government is reviewing strategies to take advantage of the potential Mayaguana has to become the shipping hub for the southern Bahamas.
Well, we have had proposals submitted to us in relation to creating a new shipping port here in Mayaguana. One of the things we noted in our blueprint for change is that Mayaguana can be the shipping hub for the southern Bahamas. We can take advantage of the deep water and the shipping lanes and the strategic location between Europe and the rest of the Latin American Caribbean region. And we do a lot of maritime logistics business in Grand Bahama. We can learn from what's being done there, and certainly we can develop around that shipping hub here in Mayaguana. This is our vision for Mayaguana.
Acting Prime Minister Cooper, whose portfolio as Deputy Prime Minister includes investments, said the government is also reviewing strategies as to how it can attract more investments into the island. He said in the meantime, the government will fulfill its commitment with respect to the basic levels of infrastructure to make Mayaguana even more attractive for new investors to the island.
Suffice to say, we want to ensure that we attract investors to Mayaguana who share the vision and the urgency to do some significant projects here in Mayaguana, and that's something we are going to continue to push to do. One of the things we recognize in the areas of investments in the government as a whole is that with having many islands across the Bahamas, as I mentioned earlier, we certainly try to attract as many investors as we can to help us to build and develop the Bahamas for the benefit of the Bahamian people, for the benefit of the residents. Coming from a small community in Exuma, myself, with a population much smaller than what we have in some parts of Mayaguana, I can tell you that we love our ancestral homes. We ain't going nowhere, and we count on the government to create opportunities to ensure that our children come back home, our children who are there stay home, and we can have a good quality of life and a better quality of life for them.
Acting Prime Minister Cooper assured the residents of the government's commitment to the ongoing support of Mayaguana, adding that residents of the island, the southern Bahamas, and indeed the Bahamas, ought to give thanks to God for his grace and mercy in sparing the country from the ravages of Hurricane Fiona. For your Government in Action, I'm Carissa Williamson.
As mentioned, Minister of Agriculture, Marine Resources, and Family Island Affairs, with responsibility for local government, the Honorable Clay Sweeting, was a part of that delegation. Mr. Sweeting applauded the efforts of the local government officials on the ground in Mayaguana.
They were able to give us play-by-play on what was happening in Mayaguana. We knew to what extent the wind spirit, the weather, and the supplies and everything in preparation leading up to that. So I just want to thank them, thank the director of the local government, and just to be here to support you and to see how best we can assist moving forward. Once again, thank you, and we look forward to offering the support that we can as the government and as the Ministry of Family Islands, which includes local government.
Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister, with responsibility for disaster preparedness and emergency response, the Honorable Miles Lorota, led the delegation of cabinet ministers and senior government officials that flew into Moss-Town, Exuma, to collect and return the 11 residents who were evacuated from the island. State Minister Lorota applauded the collaborative efforts, saying that it was indicative of the kind of synergy that can take place across the islands.
These circumstances bring out the best in Bahamians. We are our brother's keeper, and it is so encouraging when one island is willing and able to execute on short notice, taking care of our infirmed and our most vulnerable. I would just like to say thank you very much also to Sandos, who provided food in Exuma. We wanted to come as a delegation led by the acting Prime Minister to come here to let Mayaguanans know that we stand with them and to provide whatever assistance that we may need, but also to let them know let the country know that in times of need, in times of trials and tribulation, we as a country could come together to take care of our own. I would like to thank those in Mayaguana for the services that have been provided. I would like to note in particular BPL, who would have gotten the electrical services up in record time. And all of those other departments, I'd like to thank those members of Marines from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the support team.
That is all for this week. Thank you for joining us. Please do join us again next week for another edition of Your Government in Action. I'm your host, Joy Burns-Roger. Good evening.